Hey tubers, it's Tony, and in today's video I'm going to show you the location of and walk you through the process of removing everything so that you can get down to the lower intake and remove it. Screenshot this, guys, in front of you. That's everything you need to do to get this job done successfully. Okay, I'm not going to be removing the lower intake in today's video. I've already replaced the coolant temperature sensor. The only reason that I'm back is because I think a couple of my clips on the fuel injectors aren't sitting correctly. So I'm going to go back down there and double check. I'm almost sure they're not. And I wanted you guys to see, if you take the path that I'm going to show you today, how those clips actually sit on there. You need to make sure that they are seated correctly. Okay? So again, screenshot this. As with any intake job, guys, the moment you open up the engine, take shop rags and shove into the holes. You don't want anything to fall into the engine. Make sure you remove those shop rags in the end when you're done. Right quick, how do you clean the upper intake and get the gaskets out? You get a pick, guys. Dig into the rubber and pull out the old gasket. Your new gasket for the upper intake and lower intakes will go right back in just like you remove them. To clean the upper intake, once you remove the gaskets, take shop rags, brake parts cleaner, and clean the area thoroughly, making sure that there's no obstruction in the way when you put down your new upper intake gasket. For the lower intake, same thing. Shop rags, brake parts cleaner, and a light razor blade if needed to clean away any heavy residue, but do not dig into the material. Do the same thing for the lower half of the bottom intake, guys. Okay, so you want to clean the upper part of the lower intake and the bottom part of the lower intake. Any place where the intake sits, you want to make sure that surface is completely clean. Again, shop rags to prevent anything from falling into the engine. One more time, I want you guys to see how these fuel injector clips sit on there. There are grooves made for the fuel injector clips. They must be seated correctly. Anytime you remove fuel injectors, whether you're using old ones, old O-rings, inspect the old O-rings, make sure they're in good condition. Either way, make sure you put a dab of motor oil around the O-rings before you reinsert the injectors or whatever you're doing at that particular time. There are two different types of electrical connector temp sensor heads on these Mazdas. Just wanted to show you that. There's a fatter head and a skinnier head. The cx9 2010 takes the skinnier electrical connector and sensor. Okay, so one last time, fuel injector and the clips, very important. Okay, make a video as you go along, guys, if you don't know what you're doing. Again, I'm going to show you everything you need to move to get off the upper intake. I'm going to show you how to remove the fuel rail, and then the rest is easy. Again, just wanted to show you two differences in the coolant temp sensors on these Mazdas. Okay. Also wanted to show you, because I'm not removing the lower intake, I used curved needle nose pliers to remove the coolant temp sensor. Now, make sure you lock the pliers around the this part of the coolant temp sensor, and you can break it free, or you can use a short 3/4 inch or 19 millimeter wrench. Will break this free as well. Okay. When you go to screw this in, you don't have to go bonkers, but you want to make sure that it's tight. Make sure your electrical connector is locked in while you're down there. Now, very important, when you take the lower intake off, below the lower intake, there is your knock sensors as well. And that's another thing I wanted to bring to your attention. This vehicle has two knock sensors. So now it's decision time, folks, whether you want to replace those knock sensors while you're down there, since you have all this stuff torn apart. You don't want to tear all this stuff apart and then a month later the knock sensors go up and you have to go back down there. So decision time. So now I'm going to go out to the vehicle, guys, and show you everything to take apart to get to the lower intake. And again, I'm going to show you how to remove the fuel rail, and then the rest is easy. You just put everything back together in the reverse order that you use to take it apart. Okay guys, once you drain the coolant out of the vehicle, remove the battery. When you remove the battery, disconnect the black cable first, then the red cable. When you go to reinstall the battery, hook up the red cable, then the black cable. Remove the battery tray or bungee cord it up. I'm going to completely remove it. There are a number of 10mm screws and nuts that you need to remove. One 10 nut, 3 screws, and another nut back there, and then break loose anything that's holding the battery tray to this line. And you can move the battery tray out of your way. It will give you better access to work. The next thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to remove the upper part of your air box. You don't need to remove the lower part, and then we're going to remove this part of the air box. 2 clips over here, guys, 10mm. There's another 10mm over here, guys. Break this stuff loose. You're going to find this hose mounted right there. Just pull it out. Make sure you put it back in the end. On the other side, you're going to find this hose here connected in there. Pull the clip back and you can pull this off of here. Remove the engine cover. Remove your oil cap and just pull this out of the way, guys. Take note as to how it goes back down in those little holders. Now, before I proceed, for those of you looking for the thermostat, it's right here, guys. Okay, it's behind this housing. It's held in by 2 5/16 screws. Okay, break those free, and then you can go ahead and replace your thermostat if need be. Now, for those of you who are looking to replace the camshaft sensor on this vehicle with all of this stuff removed, if you look down, right there is your camshaft sensor, retained by a 5/16 screw. Keep in mind, you can pull this whole piece out of the way and it will allow you way more room. Once I break loose the camshaft sensor's 5/16 screw, I wiggle the cam sensor out. Then I break loose the electrical connector. Before you put in your new camshaft sensor, take motor oil and put around that O-ring. Put it back in, put your screw in, make sure your screw is nice and tight, and then you can go ahead and reset your check engine light if you were just working on a camshaft sensor, okay? Behind this housing, when you remove the thermostat, there is a gasket in there. You want to make sure that gasket is in there when you go to put your new thermostat back in, or you're going to have a coolant leak, okay? Very important. Now that we have all of this stuff removed, on to removing the upper intake, you are going to disconnect this clip here, and you need a little pick, guys, to put under there and wedge this up. So anything you see, red, blue, green, anything that looks like a clip like this, you have to take a pick and stick in that little groove and pull it this way, and it pops up, and then you can pull it off. Be mindful, take note as to where everything goes so that you can put it back. So you're going to remove these 3 clips, put a rag under there because some fuel may come out of the fuel rail. There is another clip back there that you need to break free as well. For more access to pull the upper intake out, break loose these 10s, one there and one there, and then you can just set this to the side. You don't need to disconnect that. You don't need to remove the throttle body, guys, but you do need to remove the 1 screw underneath the throttle body. All the screws are 5/16, okay? Disconnect the throttle body's electrical connector. And now, for the most part, you are ready to move on to removing the upper intake. The upper intake is retained by 6 5/16 screws, short screw, long screw, short screw, short screw. Any place where you see the harnesses are connected to something, break them free. You need a pry tool to either break them free. If the clips break, no worries. Just remove them and you can use tie straps like I did. It'll work just as fine, okay? So I've broken all of them free so that you see that. And again, basically all you're gonna do is take a pick set, put in this little groove and break it free. Let me see if I can do this one more time for you. Put it there and gently pry that off. Make sure it's fully open, and now you can pull these lines off. Again, for those of you who are not really savvy with this stuff, make sure you mark or make note of where everything goes so that you can put it back. Again, you may want to put a rag under here because it has the tendency to have fuel come out of this fuel rail. Then you want to break loose that red clip back there as well, okay? Because that's connected to the intake. So see, that clip back there is now broken free, and you want to make sure you pull this one off, okay? Again, take note as to how it went in there, guys, so you can put it back in the end, okay? Again, make sure you remove that 5/16 screw down there, that 5/16 screw there, and then you can go ahead and remove the 6 5/16 screws that hold the upper intake down. Make sure you disconnect the throttle body's electrical connector. When you see these little red security tabs, pull them up, and then you can push down on the tab to release them. This is where these little pick sets come in handy, guys. So you just pull up, and now you can push down on the tab gently and disconnect the electrical connector. Now you're ready to, with everything disconnected down here, meaning the wiring harness, break loose these 6 screws, taking note that this is the longest one right here. Once you break this free, I can tell you that it's a little bit of a struggle to get the throttle body past this portion. Again, you don't need to remove the throttle body. I just remove these 2 10s and place this to the side, and that gives me room to pull out the throttle body. So with all the screws disconnected, the fuel rail line disconnected, if you find the upper intake doesn't want to come straight out, give it a tap with a rubber hammer. It'll break free, guys. You don't want to pull it all the way out yet, because what you want to do is you must disconnect that PCV valve hose right there. Okay, don't pull this out with that connected or you'll break that, okay? There is another hose back there with a clamp that you need to break free. That's why you'll need a pair of needle nose pliers to go back there and do that, okay? Curved needle nose pliers preferably will help you. So see, folks, I disconnected this, moved it out of the way. It'll give me way more room to pull out the upper intake and maneuver it around to get to that rear clamp back there as well. You'll see, it'll make sense. Hold tight. Okay, guys, just wanted to show you your screws. Remember, the one that goes there is the long screw. That screw back there stays with the upper intake. It doesn't come out, so just make sure it's loose. So now, guys, that I removed the PCV valve hose, to get it out, guys, you turn it that way to get it out, and it just comes out. Seat it, and then turn it towards the passenger side to lock it in. But you want to make sure you disconnect this hose, move the upper intake a little bit. Now it allows you better access to get back there and break loose that hose clamp. make sure you put this stuff back together. For those of you who need to replace your spark plugs or ignition coils in the rear, now's the time to decide whether you're going to do that. Now, folks, with the upper intake off, again, see there's little grooves meant for your new gaskets to go in. You just take a pick, guys, dig into the plastic and pull it up. Clean it well. Make sure you put shop rags in here. Clean it well with brake parts cleaner and a shop rag as best you can. Put your new gaskets down. Make sure that they are seated correctly. And that's it for the most part, guys. Now, again, with the lower intake, you're going to make sure you clean the surface with brake parts cleaner. Use a razor blade and gently scrape away anything that a rag doesn't pull up, but just clean it as best you can, okay? Very important. Again, for those of you that need to replace your rear spark plugs or ignition coils, now is the time. The coolant temperature sensor sits right below the lower intake on this side, like right about here somewhere, guys. 3/4 inch wrench or 19 millimeter wrench will work. Now, I'm only back because I don't believe my clips are seated. See how this clip looks like it's seated in its rim, but if you look on this side, it's bowed out, so I know it's not sitting or seated correctly, so I'm back to correct that. Very, very important. Let's talk about the fuel rail right quick. With this disconnected, there are different ways you can pull the fuel rail out. The fuel rail is held by 4 5/16 screws, okay? Once you remove those screws, some people will grab the fuel rail and pull the fuel rail up. Warning, that does not always go as planned and you run the risk of breaking things. What I do is I take shop rags and I align shop rags tiles down in this area to catch any fuel that will fall. What I do is take a flat blade screwdriver or a pick and pull those little clips off. Now they have the tendency to go flying, so be careful. Once you pull all the clips off, there's 6 of them, and the fuel rail will just come up off of the injector. You will then see the blue O-ring, okay? Make sure that you put the O-ring back on top of the injector in the end before you put the fuel rail down, okay? For those of you who are just going to remove these 4 retaining screws and then pull up on the fuel rail, trying to pull the fuel injectors out of the lower intake, be careful, guys. If you see it's not working, then stop. I suggest that you simply remove the clips, all 6 of them, and then when you pull the rail up, it'll easily come up. You just need to make sure that you have shop rags down here to catch any fuel, and make sure you get up any fuel that spills, whether it spills down into the belly as well. Make sure it's clean. Down in this hole is your 2 knock sensors. One sits about here under the lower intake and another one over here. Okay, guys, if you take the route that I'm taking, which I believe is the easiest, you just have to go through the tedious process, and it is a tedious process because there's not a lot of room to make sure your clips are on. If you noticed before when I showed you, that clip was really bowed out, okay? It's seated correctly now, so that's my mission today, to come back and make sure that all 6 clips are seated correctly. Okay, guys, that still wasn't seated correctly. Now you'll look and see that it's not bowed out, okay? So very important. You just have to take your time, and let me go get the other fuel injector and show you what to do. Geez. All right, guys, I thought that was fixed. It wasn't. It is now. Notice that it's not bowed out. You just have to take your time, guys. And let me grab the other old injector and clip and show you how to get these back on. Sometimes these cameras work weirdly, but anyway, see how this is seated? when you get to the point of installing the clip, the bottom of the clip has to go around the part of the fuel rail. That's why you need a bright flashlight so that you can look, and if you climb up into the engine, you'll see that it's going over the fuel rail portion and sliding into the injector, and then you just push it in. Okay, take your time, guys. So one more look before I go ahead and fix the other 5 at how that clip goes around the rim of the fuel rail. Must go on evenly on both sides, and then you'll know that it's incorrectly when you look down and see that it's not bowed out. You'll know it's incorrectly as well, and you can see that from here. For those of you who have removed the fuel rail, whether you just pulled up on the fuel rail and removed the injectors, or whether you take the clips out and then remove the fuel rail to put the fuel rail back down, before I get that far, next thing you need to do is remove your 10 5/16 screws, guys, all the way around. Take a pry bar, break loose the lower intake, and remember, clean, brake parts cleaner, put shop rags under this as well. Brake parts cleaner, shop rag, razor blade as needed. Put your new gaskets in, replace your coolant temp sensor, make sure the electrical connector's in, and you can start putting everything back together. But for those of you who either you pulled up the entire fuel rail with the injectors connected, make sure when you put it down that it's completely seated. How will you know that it's seated correctly? And don't be afraid to push it down and make sure the injectors are back into the head or the lower intake. You're going to know everything is seated because this little bracket here, all 4 of them will line up with the lower intake. If it's flush with the lower intake, then you know you've done this correctly. For those of you who are considering using my route of removing the clips, the only thing you need to do is make sure that all O-rings on the top of the fuel injector are back on the injectors. Take a dab of motor oil and put it around all 6 O-rings, and then take your fuel rail and just push it down into place firmly. Again, you're going to know it's seated because this bracket will be flush with the lower intake. Put your 4 screws in and you can go ahead and put everything back together. Okay folks, I'm back to you. Now if you take my method of removing these clips, I'm going to warn you, it is a very tedious process to make sure that those clips are lined up. Get yourself a small pair of curved needle nose pliers, and you want to make sure that the clip is sitting in its housing correctly. So take a good look at it, take a picture if you need to before you remove it so that you know what you're doing. Okay, again, for those of you that need to replace your spark plugs and ignition coils, 5/16 retainer screw, spark plug socket, long driver, lefty loosey, righty tighty. Put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads of your new spark plugs, as that will help get your spark plugs out when you need to remove them. Keeps them from getting stuck. The electrical connectors on these fuel injectors, push the tab in and then you can pull the electrical connector away from the injector. Again, do a dummy check, guys. Clean the bottom of the lower intake, clean the top of the intake. Make sure you install your new gasket on the lower intake. That's real easy, guys. I'm not going to waste your time. Those 10 5/16 screws you need to remove. Put them back when you're done. Tighten them up until they're nice and tight, guys, until you feel true resistance, and then back off. Any place where something is connected that you need to break free from a housing held in by a clip so that you have more room, go ahead and break it free. Have yourself some tie straps on hand. That's the one thing I left out on my list of things to do. Once you put your lower intake gasket on, bolt it down. Okay, make sure it's bolted down, and put your fuel rail down however you took it apart. Okay, make sure the 4 fuel rail retaining screws is bolted down. Okay, Anything that you took apart, make sure you put back together. There are your front ignition coils and spark plugs. For those of you looking for the crankshaft position sensor, it's straight down. You have to remove the cat to access the crankshaft position sensor. There's the part number I chose as a crankshaft position sensor for this 2010 cx9. Just wanted you guys that don't really know cars to see what the new crank sensor will look like. Okay, but again, straight down. You have to remove this catalytic converter, and you do it all from the bottom of the vehicle. Just trying to give you as much information as I possibly can to help those of you that do not know what you're doing, who plan to do this for the first time. So one more look before I put the upper intake back on. Again, guys, I'm not going to waste time with the gaskets. That's way too easy. Follow what you see. Put it back together just like you're taking it apart. Most importantly is to make sure you have a new intake gasket set, upper and lower. For those of you who are going to see a round O-ring in your new gasket set for the upper and lower intake, behind this water inlet, there is a gasket. Now, when you're removing, that's something I left out, before you can pull up the intake, okay, even though you disconnected this, there are 3 5/16 screws, one here, one down below there, that you'll need to break loose to separate this portion of the coolant system from the lower intake. Just break the bolts loose and just leave this hanging there, and then you can pull the lower intake that way to get it out. I'm doing so much shit, man, I can't keep up. So behind here is a gasket that will come in your new lower and upper intake set. You want to replace this gasket just like you replace any other gasket, okay? Be mindful. And one more time, for those of you who are simply chasing the thermostat, when you put your new thermostat in, mimic what you see. Make sure that that O-ring is in there. Put the thermostat in first, just like it came out. Put your seal in around it, and then put the housing on, and then bolt it down till it's nice and tight, but don't strip anything. One more time before I put the upper intake on. There's your Duralast part number for the coolant temperature sensor. And again, remember, you can use needle nose pliers to turn that puppy out, or a short 3/4 inch wrench, or a 19 millimeter wrench. For those of you who are asking, can I get a socket in there? Impossible. Don't waste your time. I know this is a lengthy video, guys, but again, I want to give you options. Remember, you can just remove the fuel rail's 4 retaining screws and then try and raise up on the fuel rail in different spots to pull the injector out of the lower intake. One more time, warning that it does not always go as expected. You can break some things. So what I suggest that you do is, as an option for those of you who are having trouble pulling it out of the lower intake, again, you can remove these clips and then just pull the fuel rail off. These O-rings on top of the injectors will have the tendency to stay with the fuel rail. Just get a pick and pluck it out. Put your O-ring right back just like you see it, whether it's the bottom one or the top one. Very important. Again, when you put whatever you do, make sure you put a dab of motor oil around the O-rings, whether you're inserting the injector back into the lower intake or you're just putting the fuel rail back on top of the fuel injector. Take a dab of motor oil and coat the O-rings. These little clips are a pain in the ass, guys, but you got to put them back in. It allows you an easier way to get to the lower intake's 10 5/16 bolts or screws, but it's a tedious process to get them back in and make sure that they're seated correctly. Okay, very importantly, don't forget to remove your shop rags, whether it be underneath the lower intake or on top of the intake. Okay, folks, just like I have this position, that's how you're going to approach putting the excuse me, the upper intake back in. Again, you don't need to remove the throttle body, but I'll leave that up to you. But that's how you're going to put it back in, and that's why I moved all of this stuff out the way. Now, with it sitting like that, you can go back there and attempt to hook up that hose. Make sure it's on nice and tight. Put your PCV valve back on when you're done. And then you can start lining up your holes. Make sure your gasket is not tampered with, and you can start putting everything back together. Okay, folks, with the upper intake sort of cocked to the side, I have that clamp back on that hose. You can go ahead and start lining it up, but make sure you put your PCV valve hose back on. Do not damage it. Folks, as you're putting down the upper intake, you want to make sure that there are no wires underneath this. So you want to make sure that there's nothing underneath, caught up underneath the upper intake. As you maneuver this into place, you just have to make sure that there are no wires caught on anything. That clamp back there is back in. That screw right there is back in. PCV valve hose is back in. My 6 retaining screws for the upper intake are in, and I usually start hand tightening here. I go there, I go there, I come back over here, I go there, and then I come over here, and then eventually you go around and make sure that they're all nice and tight. Screw them in nice and tight until you start to really feel that true resistance, and then back off. You want to make sure you put that throttle body screw back in. Any place that's long, guys, that you need to reach into, simply tape down the screw to your socket, and that'll hold it, keep it from falling, and then you can get it started by threading it. You're going to need this method when you go to remove the housing behind the thermostat, because again, there are 3 screws. You may not be able to see them all, but they're back there. I usually use this method to put them back in so that they don't fall. Very important, guys. Put that puppy in. Put these 2 on. You want to make sure that this line is hooked up as well. If you find that you cannot push these clips down, that simply means the hose is not pushed over far enough. Okay, just do a dummy check. Make sure that you have everything over here in this corner that you took apart reconnected. Okay, very, very, very important. Don't be afraid to give this a tug and make sure that this is locked into place. Very important. You don't want this line popping off, okay? Folks, you want to make sure that that clamp back there is on. I use a short 10mm socket and a drive and a ratchet. Okay, dummy check time, guys. Again, make sure this puppy is in. Make sure all your clamps back there are tight. That clamp there is on. This hose is hooked back up. Throttle body's electrical connector. Again, we already talked about the PCV valve hose back there. Okay, make sure your air box is back on. Put its 2 clamps back in. Make sure everything is tight that you took apart. And all you need to do is put your battery back in. Remember, hook up the red cable first, then the black cable. This vehicle does not have a radiator for you to add coolant to. Make sure that your drain plug at the bottom of the radiator has been closed. Add a whole bottle of coolant to the overflow here. Then start the vehicle, and you want to run the vehicle for about 20 minutes. You're going to keep adding coolant until coolant stays at the full level. At the same time, you're bleeding the system of air bubbles that got into the system because you opened up things to allow air into it. After about 20 minutes, you can put the cap back on. If you notice that this is not reaching the full level and you may have a leak somewhere, remember you want to double check that housing, because there's a thermostat gasket and then there's a water inlet gasket behind here as well that will come with your upper and lower intake gasket set. All right, guys, that's it. I hope the video has been helpful. I know it's been done differently, probably the longest video that I have ever made. But just do a dummy check and make sure that you have everything put back together. That's how you change the coolant temperature sensor on this 2010 Mazda. Remember, needle nose pliers will work. 3/4 inch wrench, short wrench, or a 19 millimeter wrench will work as well. If you change your spark plugs, make sure that your electrical connectors are connected and your retaining screws are screwed down. Same thing again with your injectors. You want to make sure that they are clicked into place, locked into place, very importantly. All right, folks, hope the video has been helpful. Thanks for watching. Okay, guys, again, very important, do a dummy check. Make sure that everything is hooked back up. Very important. Today's video was made for layman's more so than for the folks that really know what they're doing. Okay, you want to make sure that you get this job done and you have options as far as removing that fuel rail, because it does not always come out as easy as most people make it appear in their videos. Okay, and make sure everything is hooked back up, guys. All right, folks, catch you next time. Thanks for watching. And for those of you who are going to do this for the first time, just take your time. It's a very doable job. You just have to keep track of where all your screws go, so that you can put everything back together. Peace, y'all.